He told me something that changed my life. He basically said, like, because you're pricing it so cheap, it seems like it's cheap. Like, it seems like I was surprised for how valuable this actually was because it was only $19.99. You need to quadruple the price of this thing, if not more. And I was scared to do that. I guess your stuff works, Pat. Let's go get your courses and stuff. It's gotten so big that I started a YouTube channel that's approaching 1 million subs in just about 3 years. That thing's haunted. You're going to go to hell when you sit on that thing or something, right? Like, something is wrong with that. So I was like worried about making any sort of money. I tried all kinds of things. I even got into, Amway, or as they call Scamway sometimes. Like, I was just desperate. And then what saved me was...
Now, I'm going to say a blanketed statement so you can make fun of me because I'm probably wrong here. Was this like the Pokemon Go phase, or is this after that? Why Pokemon?
Welcome to ClickFunnels Radio, the podcast that brings you the latest strategies, insights, and success stories from online marketers just like you who utilize funnels to grow their business. Our mission is simple: to help you unleash the true potential of your online business by harnessing the power of funnels. Join us every week as we bring you exclusive interviews and thought-provoking discussions that will revolutionize the way you approach online marketing. Here are your hosts, Chris Cameron and Ben Harris.
All right, everybody, welcome back to ClickFunnels Radio. We have an incredible guest today and someone that has been an absolute pioneer in the online marketing industry for a long time now and has completely been a trailblazer and set the example that so many people, including myself, love to follow and have absolutely, set the standard for what it means to be a marketer, and especially over the internet, starting from essentially, humble beginnings in zero all the way to becoming who he is. But before I introduce him, I've got to introduce my man, Chris Cameron. Chris, what's up, dude?
Hey, Ben, this is exciting, man. We've done stuff with this guy in the past too, and I'm excited to scale and do a bunch of things, but also super excited to have him as a guest on the podcast. This guy is an absolute wealth of knowledge.
Yeah. And online marketer, philanthropist, serial entrepreneur, investor, best-selling author, and I'm probably missing a few accolades, but it's my pleasure to welcome Pat Flynn to ClickFunnels Radio. Pat, how are you?
Hey, what's up, you guys? I hope nobody's disappointed by the reveal, because you talked me up really well, and then it's like, oh, it's not who I thought it was.
Well,
but.
Maybe we'll start by introducing you too, because I was, it's so funny, like obviously looking at your shelf in the background too. And then like on your website, where it says like, I'm a serial entrepreneur. Plus this, you said something like about buffalo wings and stuff, but then one caught my eye. You're like, and a protector of Baby Yoda. What the heck does that mean? Talk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a big Star Wars fan and Mandalorian fan. And in my background here, I have a Mandalorian helmet.
That's
and
awesome.
My wife and I are big Pedro Pascal fans, and she's going to all the cons now to try to meet all these people. It's kind of wild. We're just nerds. I mean, I think all of us are nerds in some way, shape, or form. But
some are marketing nerds, but yours runs deep. I mean, I was going to get to this later, but I think it's perfect time. You're like a big Pokemon fan too, like even to where you guys are doing an event this summer.
Yeah,
Really?
so not just a fan, but a creator in the Pokemon YouTube world. And I just got into Pokemon pretty recently, actually, 2020 during the pandemic with my kids. And then I kind of went really deep into it, and they've stopped, and I've kept going. And now I'm just like, so it's gotten so big that I started a YouTube channel that's approaching 1 million subs in just about 3 years. We're almost at 800,000. We're making probably anywhere between 25 to 30K a month on YouTube ads and sponsorships on that channel, which is pretty crazy.
Okay.
I'm a top affiliate. I've been using all my business stuff that I've learned in my other space here. And nobody's ever seen it in this world because it's pretty new. So I'm a top affiliate for a binder company. I'm an advisor to a tech company in the space now. And I run a live event. Last year, we had 2,500 people in Anaheim show up, all nerds.
Is this Card Party?
This is Card Party, yeah, Card.Party. And then we have 5,000 people coming up in Orlando, and we set a world record there. And it's just like everything I talked about in my book, Superfans, I was able to implement and do in this brand new space. And no, I didn't take anybody from my old business into this new one. It was completely from scratch. And it's just been this amazing case study for everything that we teach and talk about. So much so that people are like, hey, I guess your stuff works, Pat. Let's go get your courses and stuff. Like
I was going to say that, like, leave it to Pat to, take this in any direction and say, hey, it doesn't matter. It can be Pokemon, it can be anything, and you can monetize it. You can grow a big audience, and you can get that income, right? Smart passive income. Like, I think it's amazing to do that off of any type of passion that you have.
For sure. It's definitely not totally passive, I will say.
Right. I know. Right. Yeah.
It's smart. Yeah.
Smart,
What why Pokemon? What I know you mentioned 2020 got into it. Now I'm gonna say a blanketed statement, so you can make fun of me because I'm probably wrong here. Was this like the Pokemon Go phase, or is this after that? Why Pokemon?
Pokemon Go phase was 2016, so you're close.
Keep up, man.
2020 was the around the 25-year anniversary, so Pokemon put a lot of hype into it. It was a pandemic, so a lot of people were just looking for things to make them feel better in their lives because it was crazy, and so nostalgia played a role. And Logan Paul did something big in the space. He opened some packs, and it kind of like all things happened at the same time, and then it just blew up. And then as a creator, just sucking in all this information as I could and meeting people and joining communities. I was moderating all these live streams and people's channels that I was like, hey, I think I could bring something new to this space. I could bring something different. Everybody was just opening packs, and they would have thousands of people watch like a grown man open shiny cardboard.
Isn't that
and
wild?
I was like, it is wild. And then it's like, this is great, but I have storytelling capability. I have the ability to go really big into the cinematics of this on my channel. Maybe I can bring something new to this space. And it seemed to hit a chord with people.
That's fascinating.
Wow. Yeah. And you mentioned, you used everything, not only all your knowledge, but specifically from the book Superfans into, your Pokemon business now. But, with learning everything that you now know, getting started, it was in blogging, correct? Like really your start on the internet. Explain to us why the internet and why blogging.
So I wasn't set out to be an entrepreneur or a blogger or a podcaster or speaker, any of this stuff. I was on my way to become an architect. I went to school for architecture. I was in the career for a while. I was taking all my exams to become an architect. And then in 2008, I got let go. And what saved me really was, well, first of all, I didn't know this was going to be the best thing ever, but it wasn't feeling like that at the time. I actually moved back in with my parents, and I had just gotten engaged, and I was like worried about making any sort of money. I tried all kinds of things. I even got into, Amway, or as they call Scamway sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I was just desperate. And then what saved me was, in fact, a podcast called Internet Business Mastery. It's hosted by two guys, Sterling and Jay. And on that podcast, I heard an episode with a guy who was saying that he was making 6 figures a year helping people pass the project management exam or the PM exam. I was like, no way, this is insane. Like I have taken so many exams, and then it clicked. Maybe I could become somebody who could become a resource for these really difficult exams in the architecture space. And I chose the one that I had recently taken called the LEED exam, which is about green buildings and environmental design. It's kind of like a niche and a niche and a niche, if you will. And I started a website, and I put all my notes on there, and I started just kind of teaching this stuff, not knowing what was going to happen. And then within a few months, I started to see that the website was ranking really high in Google. People started to share me on forums. I became seen as an expert in this space because I was the only one kind of talking about this stuff, even though I had barely passed the exam. It's one of the most difficult exams. And then I launched a study guide, on this blog. And the study guide I sold for $19.99. And at the end of 2008, I sold it. And in 1 month, I made $7,908.55, which was 2.5 times more than I was making as an architect. And I was like, this is weird. This is wrong. Well, like the FBI SWAT team's going to come and just like take me to jail. Like, I didn't understand it. I was just kind of figuring it out on the go.
Can I dive into that for a second too? I think so many entrepreneurs or people who are just starting in the space don't necessarily realize the power of that first influx of cash in the entrepreneurial space. Like, what did that do for you? Was that like, okay, now I know it can be done, and now it's just a scaling thing? Like, talk us through the emotions and what was happening at that time.
Well, I remember my very first dollar. In fact, it was $1.18 through Google AdSense.
Really?
Somebody said, hey, put Google AdSense on your website and it'll put an ad there for you and you'll make money when people click on it. And I was like, okay, that sounds easy. Drop the code in. Next day, I wake up to $1.18 and I was on a high. I was like, I was pumped for $1.18. And yes, I know I could have found that in my couch at home, but it was just the idea that I had created something. Somebody went there, found it, clicked on it, and I made money. I was like, wow, how do we get 2 people to do that? How do we get 10 people? How do we get 100 people to do that? Right. So then that's where SEO really came into play. And I was like, okay, need more people on website. Let's do these things. And back then SEO was a little bit different than it is now. But what it all really came down to was just providing the best information possible for the people who were looking for it at the time. And then, of course, that first sale of that PDF file that I sold, and it was literally just a PDF file. I called it an ebook, and people didn't even know what an ebook was back then. That's how like dated this is. But I got a button from PayPal, and then I woke up one morning, and it was like $19.50 12 cents because of PayPal fees in my account. And I was just like, what the heck? This is insane. And then the next day it was like more sales, more sales. People started spreading it around. SEO started to play a role in that as well. And then the next month I was like, wow, okay. Instead of just putting the purchase button on the homepage, what if I put it on some of the other pages on the website? Okay, so this is all about optimization and kind of like at least getting a taste of what it's like to see something start and then optimizing, and not just like figuring it out, but going to people in my mastermind group and in this community that I was in and asking like, what could I go from here? What do I do next? Where else could I do this? And that's where I learned about, okay, well, what's the landing page? And I was like, what's a landing page? And they're like, okay, well, this is the sales page where people go to determine whether or not they want to buy. Well, there's all this information out there about how to make an amazing sales page and how to make excellent copy. And then I just started diving in, and every day I would improve something. And every day I'd see more sales come in. And it got to the point where in May 2009, this $19.99 ebook was making $35,000 a month.
A PDF online.
Yes, a PDF.
30,000. Like people are exchanging information, like what you're teaching them, but people will look at that outside and say, no, a PDF is not worth that. But it's not the PDF. It's not the ebook. It's the value of the content. And that's, I think, what a lot of times people don't understand.
Yeah,
that's
or even one level beyond that, right? It's okay, when you get the valuable content, what does that unlock for you, right? It's like, if your student is like, Mario, and you're selling flowers that make them shoot fireballs, it's like, okay, you can all day long talk about your fireball flower superpower. We're talking about Super Mario. And then it's like, okay,
enough to understand that.
Yes, for sure. Like I said, nerdy background, 80s baby. What you're selling though is the fact that you can more easily kill creatures. You can get through the levels faster. Ultimately, what you're selling is being able to kill Bowser and then get the princess at the end. Right. So what I discovered back then, even early on, I'm so grateful, is like people didn't want to take this test. Right. They didn't want to take the test. They wanted to just get it over with. So my guide was positioned as reduce your study time so that you can move on with your life. My guide was positioned as get a raise, right? Get promoted when you get this credential. Therefore, you could probably realize that I was undercharging big time for this thing, because the promotion could be worth tens of thousands of dollars to somebody. So I eventually learned those things over time, but that's how this was working so well, because it was not a here's all the answers you need. It's here's how to get through this so you can move on to the next step.
Selling the result, not
the result, the transformation. Yes.
Yeah. Pat, I want to hit on something you had, and then I kind of want to dive into your $19 offer. But you mentioned that, when you were learning so much on the come up, scaling your website, you were a part of masterminds, right? And you had friends in the area. And not only were you asking them for more information, you were asking questions the right way, as in not like, hey, Pat, how do I become a millionaire? But it was more like, hey, I've done X. I want to get to Y. What should I do next? Right? Like, what's the next step ahead? Could you hit on how that impacted you, along with, I'm sure, the information you were studying?
Yeah, I learned this thing early on from this group called just-in-time learning. And that means just only allowing yourself to learn about the next thing that's on your list.
Huge.
Right? Which is huge, because me as a serial and perpetual learner and perpetual starter, it was something that I had to overcome, because I just, I was the person subscribed to, 40 RSS feeds for blogs and would listen to 20 podcasts thinking that downloading all that information would help me. But what I really needed was just the answer to the next step so I could move on and move forward. And so what I eventually learned was like, okay, let me figure out this next step. Let me experiment with that, do it, and then go, okay, what's next? And not just figure it out from there, but go, okay, who's done this before? Raise your hand, or like, who here has just written their sales copy for their sales page? Where did you learn that? What did you do? What would be your best tip? And this is, I think, what really helps me as a podcaster, because I'm just so curious about doing things, but narrowing that focus to that next thing has been huge. So just-in-time learning, I still practice that today. And that's how I'm able to seemingly accomplish a lot of things, because I don't allow that other FOMO to happen, even though there might be great information that can help me. I don't need that right now. So that's how
it might be too much, right?
Right.
It might be too much. What's next? What's the next step?
Exactly. Or it might veer you off the path and go, okay, well, that's a nice shiny object that I could go to. And then there's another one, and there's another one. And now the thing that needed me doesn't have my attention or energy, and I'm no longer moving forward. I'm actually moving sideways or potentially backwards.
That's so key. That's massively important for a lot of people listening because, the majority of our audience are learners, right? They are making their first dollar online, scaling to their 2 Comma Club award, their dream car award if they're an affiliate. So there's a lot of people that do struggle with, I'm saying shiny object syndrome, but, trying to learn everything where it's like, one step ahead, right? The whole story of, Frank Abagnale from Catch Me If You Can of I just stayed one chapter ahead. That's all I had to do. And even progressing as well. Okay, cool. So into your offer, which it was $19, correct? Is that what you said?
It was 19, although in March, I had a really funny email from somebody who bought the practice exam stuff and passed his test. He was so thankful. He reached out. He was like, hey, Pat, I'm a business owner. I own my own architecture firm. And I just can't help but notice that like you're severely undercharging for this thing. And it was really kind of him to do that. And he's a business owner, so he knew numbers. I'm not. I was just figuring it out. And he told me something that changed my life. He basically said, like, because you're pricing it so cheap, it seems like it's cheap. Like, it seems like I was surprised for how valuable this actually was because it was only $19.99. You need to quadruple the price of this thing, if not more. And I was scared to do that because I wanted to be the person who was cheaper. I wanted to be the one that was accessible to everybody. I didn't understand the psyche of a buyer in that something cheaper and or free means they're probably less likely to do the thing, and just the perceived value is something that's cheaper. If you go to like an antique store and there's all this amazing furniture and it's thousands of dollars and you see this beautiful chair, but it's only $5, like,
it makes a question.
Like, that thing's haunted. You're going to go to hell when you sit on that thing or something, right? Like, something is wrong with that. And that's that's what this person was trying to tell me. So I didn't quadruple my price again because I was scared to do that. And I was like, oh, like, again, we marketers often think of the worst case scenario, right? I'm like, I'm going to double the price and then I'm going to lose all my customers. And then, the SWAT team's going to come. I always went to the SWAT team. I don't know why. They just were right outside my door for
Bashed on your door.
Yeah. So I increased the price to $29.99. And I just wanted to see what that was like for the next month. And I was like, okay, watch, sales are going to go down. No, sales went up that month. Wow. Not just revenue, but in fact, quality or quantity of sales went up. And then the biggest lesson came a few months after that. This was all happening in such a short period of time too. The company, the United States Green Building Council, actually came out with their own study guide. They didn't have one before, and they came out with their own. And I thought I was dead in the water, because why would people buy a guide from me rather than the company that literally writes the questions for the exam? I was like, I'm screwed. This is done. Well, that month, I sold more guides than I had ever sold before. I think it was like 2 or 3 times the normal amount, because people were going around and finally shopping around because their guide was really expensive. They had all this overhead, and it was like $299 to buy their thing. So they started shopping around. People started talking. They started to go, oh, well, check out Pat's guide at greenexamacademy.com. It's much more affordable. And this guy is just like you. And that's what I eventually found. I actually did a survey to my customers during that month because I was so surprised. Again, I thought I was dead. I was already putting applications in for architecture jobs. But people told me, I bought from you because you are me. Like, I could relate to you. And so I leaned into that more. I started to talk more story about what it was like to just be an up-and-coming architect, not hiding that anymore because I thought that made me less professional, but actually being more forthcoming with it because it made me more relatable. And this is something I've rediscovered more and more, even when SPI started and I started teaching entrepreneurship. When I leaned into, I don't have a mansion. My Lamborghini is actually a 2009 Toyota Sienna and like a soccer mom van. And I'm just doing this for my kids and my family. People really resonated with that. Oh, this isn't like Tim Ferriss or Gary Vaynerchuk or all these people, Ty Lopez, whatever. This guy's just like me. I'm going to follow this guy. And that's been huge.
I mean, 50% increase in price and competition coming to town. And that is when you do the most courses ever. I mean, that's awesome. There's so much kudos to you for that. But I know there's more into that. I mean, I think being relatable is massive. Russell talks about this all the time. Like, you can say, hey, here I am. I'm a 2 Comma Club award winner, blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't always that way. Kind of coming off that pedestal and saying, well, here's where I'm at. And I'm going to bring you because I know where those landmines are. or anything like that. Did you have a lot of feedback other than that one person? Like,
Oh,
what made
yeah.
you kind of shift to that?
Yeah, it was people in my mastermind group were saying I should raise the price, but I needed to hear it from my own customer to really believe it. I think, I don't know. And again, I was just scared. I've been more open-minded to changes and kind of seeing things from outside the bottle. You can't read the label when you're inside the bottle. That's the other thing I found. It's like, it's so hard to
Mic drop.
see what the next steps are when you are literally in the path yourself. And then, I continue to do that. And today, I even still, this surprises a lot of people, even in my business now with, hundreds of thousands of people on my email list and millions of dollars coming in. I still take the time to 5 times a month try to get on a Zoom call with a brand new subscriber on my email list. And those calls, first of all, people are really surprised that I do that. They're like, is this a scam? Like, what are you doing? But then I get on the call, they see it's me, and I just ask them questions like, what are you struggling with right now? What are your big goals? Tell me what you've tried before that hasn't worked, and why are you coming to SPI exactly? Like, what is attracting you to us? And I don't sell anything on those. I don't do anything but gather intel, and that is the most golden information. It's allowed me to stay directly in contact with who it is that I'm serving, as those people also adjust and change over time too. This is why we've shifted our model from more one-off courses like in 2017 to 2020 to now focusing on community, because we've realized through these conversations that people are overwhelmed. They don't want just more information. We're at a buffet line of information. Everybody's like bloated and obese with info now.
Even free info, right?
Yeah, free info. And it's like, okay, well, if I just package information that people can get for free, that's not necessarily going to be enough unless it is important to build a lot of trust and have reputation. That still works. But if you, in fact, combine that with what we call community-powered courses, the people, the accountability, the quote-unquote gym partner that's going to get you up on the day that you don't want to get up, that's where you start to see results. And we've seen a 2 to 2.5 times X results in completion rates and transformations in our courses since injecting the community into that. And that only happened because we were chatting with people directly, which is something anybody and everybody should do. And I think because we're on the internet, we often try to hide behind our screens and keyboards when it comes to this stuff. In fact, the best way to grow your online business is to get offline. Actually go to like conventions and events and talk to people in person. And it's huge. Yet we're I know introverts because I'm one myself, and I know it can be hard, but it is totally worth it, especially if you really care about your audience and want to serve them.
Wow.
Right.
I want to shift gears unless you had any more on that, Ben.
Even one last question on, really connecting with your subscriber base and your customers. Do you still to this day hear feedback that surprises you of like, I didn't see that coming?
Not really, because we're so in tune with it. I think. I think if something comes as a surprise to us, we didn't do our job. You know what I mean? We try to avoid that by having these moments and conversations. That's also the benefit of the community. We hear what people are saying as it's happening, right? So it's no longer a surprise. It's just, it is what it is, versus, oh, I've been so far removed from my audience, and then all of a sudden, boom, I get smacked in the head with something that was unexpected. Then if that were to be the case, I would say we weren't doing our job. So no, we don't get surprised anymore. We try to stay to where the puck is going as much as possible.
Got it. Are you getting that feedback like just through surveys? Is this something that's happening organically? You've created a place where people feel that they could say that. How are you getting your customers and members to actually give you that feedback, and how do you collect it?
Yes to all of the above. So we do run surveys. We do one annually, which is really important because we can get, what's really beneficial about that is we get typed out answers from our audience for open-ended questions, right? And those are really important because we just use that copy right back to them,
that's good.
Right? So that's really good. But we also have the community where conversations are happening all the time. So we have that as well. But in addition to that, in our communities, we have what we call town hall meetings. So for anybody who wants to say something, there is a time and a place and a space to say that, and say it safely, say it, anonymously if they want to. And that again gives us a direct point of contact. And that's something that my team is definitely needs to get the credit for, because they implemented that. And it's just like in a small city, you have a town hall, people get to speak up in a safe space and get to feel like they're heard. And that's exactly what a person wants when it comes to a community. They want a sense of belonging, and they want to make sure that they're heard, versus just kind of like sharing things in the ether and then they kind of disappear like those old comment boxes at restaurants that were basically just complaint control.
Yeah, that's right. Nobody's leaving a review for just a regular gallon of milk.
No, no, no.
People complain, that's their reviews. And so this is all virtual. This is a virtual kind of open mic thing. Do people submit those questions ahead of time, or you guys just kind of queue them up?
Some people submit questions ahead of time, especially if they can't come to that town hall because, we have a worldwide audience and not everybody can make it at all times. But the second part is it's on Zoom or inside of Circle, and people can come on and say what they want to say, and it's great. And people feel that real connection to us as a team, and that helps with retention and reduces churn, but also again helps people feel like they're being heard, and that's the differentiator between our community and a lot of other communities that might be out there. There's a ton of great communities, by the way, but in many cases, it's just a small little amount of attention goes a very long way.
So shift gears here for a second. Like, we've all heard the term, jack of all trades, master of none. I find this very interesting because usually somebody has to grab one like medium and like lean into it, whether that's YouTube. I mean, Pat, you're doing all of it. You're doing podcasts, YouTube, newsletters, blogs. So my question is there one that you feel that you are the absolute best at, or your favorite, and why?
This is a great question. First of all, master of none. I rather say Pat of all trades, master of fun. That's
there you go.
Hey,
Pat of all trades, master of fun. Because I do try to find the fun in it and all the things that keeps me energetic. When I'm energetic behind whatever it is I'm doing, from blog to podcast to YouTube, the audience can feel that and responds in a similar way. But if I were to choose just one platform to be on, I mean, the newsletter is kind of its own thing, right? Email list is very important. No matter what it is you're doing, you need to be building your email list. You need to be continually and constantly reaching out to your audience and providing value, but also surveying and building a relationship with them through that medium. So I think no matter what, email is going to be very, very important if you have a business, especially. Plus, it's just an insurance policy. If any one of these platforms goes away or an algorithm changes, which we have seen, people who have been focusing on SEO recently have been gotten slammed by some Google changes. Well, if you had an email list, you have a way to continually contact your audience. So, enough on that. Right now, two mediums that I love the most: podcasting, obviously, and YouTube, for different reasons. I mean, I think both are great. YouTube has the reach. I will say YouTube has the algorithms, the reach, the ability for any one of your videos to get in front of millions of people if you structure the right click and stick strategy. The click is the title and thumbnail. The stick is the retention through that video and holding people to the end, the storytelling, the reason why they need to stick around. If you nail that, YouTube's going to help you and support you and push you in front of a lot of people and give you free impressions. But YouTube's hard. YouTube is video. YouTube is a lot more editing. YouTube is a lot of competition. And so there's a lot of things that go into that, which is why I also love podcasting, because podcasting, there's far less podcasts. I think there's like 50 million active YouTube channels, 200 million, if not a 500 million blogs. There's less than 1 million active podcasts. There's more than 1 million podcasts, but active, like within the last 90 days, there's still less than 1 million of them. I mean, it's still wild, wild west, it seems, even though it might not seem like that, because just the findability of the podcast is a little bit harder. It's not like YouTube. And yeah, we have Spotify, which is big, and of course, Apple Podcasts, but it's not quite like YouTube in terms of reach.
Yeah, YouTube's almost become its own search engine alone.
Oh, for sure.
Podcast hasn't quite caught up to that.
Not quite, although with all the AI stuff, that like a lot of that stuff is changing for sure. But the idea of the ability for you to get in front of your audience for 30 minutes, an hour, sometimes 2 hours in one sitting, while a person might be doing something else, like walking the dog or washing the dishes or doing home chores. Like, there's no other medium that allows you to get that deep for that long with an audience member. So honestly, if you had to make me choose, if I had 1,000 loyal subscribers, I would want 1,000 loyal podcast listeners over 1,000 YouTube viewers. Because if you think about the listening behavior, a person is with you in their ear, and it's just you two and whatever else they're doing in their life. On YouTube, you're competing with, I don't know, 50 thumbnails at the same time.
Next video, like every.
Right. Yeah. If you're holding people for 5 minutes, you're doing a great job on YouTube, right? Versus it's easy to get a half hour of a person's time when you've hooked them and they put that phone in their pocket. That's what I call the magical moment. When they go, okay, I'm about to go on this run. Let me find something to listen to.
They're running with Pat. That's it.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
That's crazy.
and then they think about it and they go deeper, and then you make them think more, and the episode ends and they go, oh my gosh, that was incredible, because there's no exit button or new thing trying to get in their way. They have time to think about and marinate on what you just told them. So the end of your show should be really good, and hopefully push them into the next episode. But that, in addition to how easy it is for things like this to happen, connections between influencers and authorities in the space, much easier on podcasts versus on video. And to get 30 minutes or an hour of a person's time, you can't help but build a relationship with them during that moment. And that is so key. So many of my now business partners, friends, companies that I advise, those relationships started by asking them to come on my show. And I had some students of mine who their only goal with the podcast, they don't care how many people listen. It's literally there just to set up a space for them to talk to other people in the space without it being weird, right? It's just such a smart thing. So all those things combined, I would still lean toward podcasting.
I'm going to ask a selfish question, because this may not be for anybody but for Chris. But it seems to me that when people are advertising on a podcast versus, say, like, there's an ad in a YouTube or something like that, or in a newsletter, like, listen, if people go to the newsletter, they're going to click on your ad right there. They're getting the information on YouTube. They're going to do this. But let's say that there's some type of integrated read in the podcast. You've done some of this where, you're advertising somebody else's, there's a sponsorship.
Yeah.
If I'm out running or hiking or skiing or whatever, and I'm in it with Pat here, and then something else comes on and Pat tells me to go do this, I'm probably going to say, okay, later. Right. And then I'm going to wait to do this. So is it less effective for sponsorships on podcasts than like YouTube or newsletters? Do you have any opinions on that?
It can be less effective, but in fact, it could also be more effective. It depends on how you position it. Number one, if you're going to do call to actions on your podcast, no matter what the call to action's for, if you drop more than 2 in the entire episode, essentially, like, people are going to be confused and not know what to do, right? If you have a reminder, however, at the beginning, in the middle, and the end to a particular thing, maybe your lead magnet or newsletter or the sponsorship, then it's more likely that a person's going to do that. Sponsorships on podcasts work really well for brand awareness and brand relationships. This is where, okay, it's not just a 30-second integration before a person then moves on a YouTube video. It's actually maybe a conversation with the founder of that company.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a more integrated case study that goes into detail, and the tool that you're talking about or the brand is just the tool that you use, but you're talking about a story and a transformation that goes along with it. That's where it can be just much deeper. Again, the idea of a podcasting going deeper, and that is of value to a sponsor as well. I have a student of mine, Wojciech is his name. He's from Poland, and he has a podcast about fire science, like literally the science of fire. It's a niche in a niche in a niche. There's like 8,000 people in the world that would ever care about this podcast. And what's cool is he has most of them listening to his show. He's been able to build a brand reputation by inviting all the other scientists on, by bringing the and he landed. So he only gets like 800 downloads per episode or something like that, right? Maybe 1,000, maybe sometimes more if it's a really good one or one worth re-listening. Yet he was able to land a 5-figure annual sponsorship, like more than he makes at his day job, with a very tiny podcast. How? Well, he positioned it like this: like, hey, if you come on and you sponsor this podcast, we'll mention your brand every single week for 52 weeks, which is a lot. So like a person who listens to the show can't help but know that this brand now exists, right? We're going to invite you on the podcast, but more than that, let me position it for you. How much do you spend at an event that you sponsor? Oh, well, we spend $10K per event. We go to like 5 events per year. And he's like, okay, well, how many fire science people go to these events? Oh, maybe about 500 people. See where this is going?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, he did a beautiful job of positioning the fact that there are not just more people who listen to the show than go to these events in person that these guys pay $10,000 for, but rather they also listen for so long, right? And it's not just like, okay, there's 500 people at the event, but how many actually go to your booth and have a conversation with you?
Yeah,
Okay,
and then
well,
it's loud, and they're and they're distracted.
Right?
It's different. Yeah.
Here, I'm going to tell the listener who is engaged with this podcast about your brand. Hey, let's do a deal. Boom. Easy money. So key. So you don't need, as many people say, 30,000 downloads a month minimum to work with a sponsor. A lot of podcast sponsorships now are a result of what now people know about the loyalty that comes with the podcast listener. And if you're in a very specialized niche, this works even better because you know where money is being put and how it's being spent in this space, hopefully, or do the research to do that. So you can direct some of that back toward you and the loyalty that you've earned with the show.
Yeah, and not to mention the power that can come from partnerships, from JV. Then you're asking particular questions about the person that you're interviewing. I mean, I see podcasts can be crazy, crazy powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
A quick question on that, because one, I agree with everything you have said, even just about media and, forming a bond with your audience and how you can do that better with podcasts. Why is it still so underserved?
I think because it is not as fast growing as other platforms. I mean, think about TikTok. Your first TikTok could get 5,000 views, and that feels good. There's like endorphins that come with that, and it makes you want to push more. But then the TikTok algorithm goes, okay, well, if you want more views, you got to publish more content, and then you start to get on this hamster wheel, and that sucks. YouTube, it's very, very easy to see growth there, but it's harder to measure the depth of the relationship you have with your audience. There is no graph that shows you that. I mean, there kind of is. Maybe it's the retention graph that you might get from Apple or Spotify in terms of your podcast episodes. But in general, it's hard to measure. And what's really interesting is that depth and the loyalty that does play a role in the ROI that you have, but it's not a direct ROI. It's hard to go, okay, people came from this video to then buy this course. It's hard to measure that, if not almost impossible, unless you use something like a coupon code or a unique URL to track this episode to this sale. So for business owners especially, it's not as attractive as like YouTube or a blog and anything that can have a campaign put behind it. It still feels like, I don't know, like not solid in terms of what it could do for you. Although we all know inherently it does work and works really, really well. It's hard to measure. I think a lot of brands maybe that come from a more traditional background want to see those numbers, want to see things measured. And because of that, it's like, oh, podcasting. I mean,
sure.
Yeah, you're having fun conversations, but what does that do for us really? But for many successful business owners like myself, I also can attribute specific partnerships and relationships that were built on these podcasts that have accounted for millions of dollars.
Yeah, that's massive.
You know what I mean? It's like it's hard to measure.
I think this is also important though to point out to everybody. Yeah, this comes from a question about what's your favorite, and we're talking about podcasts, but there's also a reason that you're doing YouTube, newsletters, blogs, because the end user. If you're a podcast person, you're a podcast person. If you're a YouTube person, you're a YouTube person. You read blogs, and this is how to hit all the segmented people on, your list and grow it in a bunch of different ways. Would you agree? That's why you do all?
Yeah, you can. So if you think about most people, they usually just have one platform that they absorb all their content on, or that they're mostly committed to. So if you are on the other one, then you're never going to show up to them. So having things on other platforms is great. And there's a number of different ways to do that. You can have a different style of content on one platform and versus another. So on podcasting, you can go more in depth with interviews and more storytelling. On YouTube, you can go more educational. That being said, you can also repurpose and have a lot of the similar kinds of content across these different platforms. And this is where a lot of tools are being used. Like I think what is it called? I forget. There's so many. Opus Clip is the one.
Oh, that'll actually repurpose a bunch of stuff.
So you could take, for example, a long form video, put it into Opus Clip, and automatically it will choose 10 different clips from that long form.
It's cool.
Put transcripts on it in vertical format. And in general, it picks really good clips. Like it uses algorithms and the AI to go, okay, what are the most engaging parts of this thing? They don't all work really well, but the one or two then can be put on these different platforms. You can obviously also rip out the audio from a video thing and put it into podcast, or the other way around, go podcast audio first, but then pop that video and RSS feed into YouTube now. You can put a podcast RSS feed on YouTube, and it will be displayed as a single image for anybody who wants to listen on YouTube and YouTube Music. So there's a lot of repurposing and kind of cross-pollination, but that can also be troublesome because if you do put your energy everywhere, then it's not focused in one spot to go as big as it can. So there has to be a balance. And if you have a team, that's awesome. But if not, I would still remain focused on one platform, master it, own it there. Like I'm going to become the number one blank on YouTube and not even worry about anywhere else, and just, maybe that's that. And then you can expand from there if you expand your team, or just, again, the big thing with these platforms is, okay, it's nice to be on those platforms. Views are great, but how is this turning into business? Are you getting people on your email list, and then are you converting those people into sales and helping them even further? And many, if not most people on these platforms aren't even thinking that way. I know we do because we're entrepreneurs, which is a huge advantage. But most people who have views and subscribers aren't thinking about email lists at all. They're just thinking about more views, more subscribers, and it's a shame. They're just unlocking one monetization method, which is ads on the platform. And that's just a bonus, in my opinion, to what you could potentially do.
Gosh, there are now so many different directions. We got to take this conversation, even diving into your story too. And it's been amazing to kind of hear all of it. If somebody, and I guess this is definitely more towards personal preference, but you mentioned starting and sticking to one platform until you accomplish X, right? I'm going to be the top 1% and certain. Is there a way you would suggest people going about, let's ask this, go about picking which one they would select if they're just starting out?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of where you feel like you could provide the most energy. What are you stoked for? What would you get up for to do? Even if you weren't doing well right at the beginning, like what are you most excited for? And maybe where your audience is hanging out, and just kind of commit to that for 6 months. And I know we talk a lot about quality, and the quality and the value is really important. But in the beginning, especially on some of these platforms, especially on YouTube, quantity is actually key. Just start messy. Don't worry about being perfect. Get those reps in. Make every video better than the last. And ultimately, you're going to see that things are going to pick up. And it just takes one video to give you a signal of, oh, this is what the people are doing for me. I'm going to lean into that now. And I interviewed MKBHD, the most prolific tech reviewer in all of YouTube and perhaps the world, on my show. And he said that his first 100 videos were for less than 100 subscribers. It took him that many videos just to kind of figure out what he was doing and what people liked about it. And now he's at 20 million subscribers.
Holy smokes.
Which is insane. And he's now doing these huge brand deals. I think he just did a brand deal with like a Rivian. Like he's now on the board of Rivian. Yeah. Like that's crazy. And awesome too. And like, he's just a creator, just like all of us. He just leaned into and gave it time to find the thing that he was, good at and leaned into that. And, brands are kind of reaching out to him now. And he has control. He could say yes or no to whoever he wants at this point. And in the beginning, get those reps in and just try to improve and, focus that learning, just-in-time learning. And again, if you can account for who it is that your audience is and what's the transformation, then just answer questions, create stories, do case studies, like just unlock things as you go. And you're going to see some great things happen.
I also think it has to do with what you enjoy. Like if you wake up out of bed and be like, okay, it's like poking, needles in my eye to do my TikToks or whatever. Like maybe if you're just a YouTube person, then be the YouTube person, right? I mean, yeah. You say that you enjoy podcasts. Would you speak to that? Like, is there something with passion that goes down to this? Or is this just what is working and what isn't working?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When we go through the process of like doing something new like this, oftentimes it starts with a spark, right? Like inspiration. That's really important, but that's not enough. Right. That you get that when you scroll through Instagram, you see a cool inspirational like thing, and then you just move on. Right. Like you have a little thought and then you move on. That's often what happens if you just rely on inspiration. Motivation is really key. What is this for? Why am I doing this? The why behind it's going to be really important. So think about that as well. But as we all know we need to go to the gym, and we know we want to get inspired. And maybe in January we are, but then it falls through because we don't have some of these other things. We need willpower. We need discipline. We need to commit to the schedule and give ourselves time to actually make things happen, even if we don't want to. So yes, motivation and spark, absolutely key. But you also need to either have accountability partners or have processes in place to just continue even though you don't want to, because that's going to be the differentiator. That is the world testing you. How much do you really want this? I know it was exciting in the beginning. The honeymoon phase is over. Let's work on this.
Work might wear off. Yeah.
Exactly.
It will work.
Exactly. The next thing that you can use to your advantage is habits. So creating habits so that you're automatically just doing these things and making that easy for you. This is James Clear and Atomic Habits, right? If you want to get into the habit of creating YouTube videos, then don't make it hard for you to create YouTube videos. Have the camera set up in one place, have the lighting set up in one place, and be able to just, as much as possible, sit down, record, and go. And creating those habits and just building that muscle of getting in there. And, you know, even though you might be nervous or fearful, you're learning what that's like and you're dealing with it. And the final thing is actually passion. That's the thing that's going to help you go deeper with this than anybody else. That's going to help you through all the tough times. That's going to help you when you're about to give up, which is usually right before the inflection point happens and everything grows. That passion's what's going to keep you going despite all those other things. And if you do all those things combined, then you're set up for success. And if not, you're at least set up to learn as you fail. And that's really important too. You make mistakes, you fail, you pivot. And the worst thing you can do is just stop because you've already given yourself this momentum. You might as well at least push that momentum somewhere else.
Yeah, you're getting education either way. If you think something's not working, you've still learned. That's school of hard knocks. I mean, Pat, I guarantee for the first 5-10 years of you doing this, that was so much education. I love what you said about that. I mean, tell us maybe a couple things that you learned from mistakes that you made along the way.
In 2011, I had a couple friends of mine who also had blogs who launched WordPress plugins. They hired a developer. They launched WordPress plugins, both within a month from each other. They didn't even know each other. I just happened to notice this pattern. And they both launched to $100,000 because they promoted premium WordPress plugins to different softwares. And I was like, oh my gosh. This is insane. I have 3 times as many people following me than you guys. I have an audience of entrepreneurs who use websites. I'm going to build a WordPress plugin too. Like, this is money in the bag for sure. So I found a developer. I came up with an idea. What was supposed to take 6 months and $6,000, or 6 weeks and $6,000, took 6 months and $16,000. There was so much back and forth. There were so many frustrations on both ends. On my end, because I was like, this isn't happening fast enough. But on their end, because they're like, you didn't even tell us exactly what you want. This is like, I don't even know what you want. I wasn't clear with the motive. Anyway, what finally happened was I had something that was decent enough to launch, and I shared it with a few friends and fans, and they were like, meh, this is cool, but I mean, this kind of other tool has that already. And they were like, oh, but what if it did this? What if it did this? Oh, it'd be cool if it did this. And I'm like,
feedback.
Oh my gosh, I should have had these conversations before I even spent money on building this thing. This is where my book, Will It Fly, came from, because it's how to test and validate your business idea so you don't waste your time and money, which I didn't do. So big lessons there. Number 1, test and validate your ideas. 2, have conversations. It's far more beneficial to have conversations and even share your idea before it happens. There's so many more benefits to that than the con, which is, oh, somebody might steal my idea. That's usually not going to happen anyway, but even if
right?
Yeah, exactly. And then thirdly, the worst thing I did was I made the money drive the decisions on what to do. I was money hungry. I was doing this for the money versus, okay, let me start with the problem. I ended with I tried to put a square peg in a round hole, right? Like, this was not going to work. If I started with my audience, what is the problem? Let me build you a solution. It would have solved everything. Instead, I started with the money I was going to make. And that is the lesson I learned. And it was a very expensive lesson, but it was a good one. And I'm happy to pass it forward for free today.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Incredible. I know. I have one final question. I want you to define this statement, because I've read it in your content. I've heard you say it. Come for the content, stay for the community. What's that mean to you? Yeah, so people search for content. They need answers. They want answers. That's why they eventually come your way as a creator, as somebody who's providing information, infotainment online. But then oftentimes we forget that once people get the answers, then they're gone. Then they leave. Then they're going to move on to the next thing. But what can get them to stay are the people that they find there as well. And I remember in 2013, I spoke at an event called FinCon. And oftentimes when I go to these events, I rent out like a little, pizza joint or a bar or something. And I just invite all the fans there. I want to meet them. I want to hang out, get to know them a little bit more. It's something I talk about in my book, Super Fans. It's a really fun thing to do. Bring your community together. And so I did this. And I remember shaking hands. I felt like a wedding, right? It was like shaking hands with everybody, just saying hi, making sure everybody was happy, passing out things.
And at the end of the night, we were leaving, and I remember seeing this one woman who I had not seen all night. And I felt so bad because some people traveled really far to come here. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, let me spend the time walking and talking with her. And I go up to her, name is Jennifer. I said, Jennifer, I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to chat with you tonight. Like, maybe we could chat at the event later. So we stop. She stops me. The group keeps going. She turns to me and she goes, Pat, don't be mad when I say this, but I didn't come here to see you. And initially I was like, whoa, like, then why are you here? And she said, no. Like, I said, don't be offended, but you look offended. Stop. She said, I never get a chance to find people like me who understand entrepreneurship, who talk the same language that I do. I hear you every day on the podcast, and I love your podcast. I hear you all the time, but this is the first time I've ever gotten in a room with people like me, and I've met some new friends. Somebody and I are going to have a business conversation tomorrow to potentially create a partnership together. Thank you so much for bringing us together. And I was like, dang, okay, that's why community is important, because it's not even about me at that point. It's not about the me to subscriber or subscriber to me conversation. It's the subscriber to subscriber conversation. It's the ability for your people to, in the same ballpark, all high five and hug each other, even though they don't know their names or even know each other, simply because they're wearing the same colored ball cap and your team just hit the grand slam to win the game, right? That's so important to understand. And so content brings people in, but when you show that there's other people like them too, and you can do that in a few ways. Number one, you have a community, you share case studies, you highlight, like Donald Miller says in StoryBrand, the audience, and they are the hero of the story, not you, they. When you highlight that, when you listen, when somebody else is there on your behalf, when people start realizing that there are other people like them here, then they're going to stick around, because that's what people ultimately want. That's inherently what we humans want. We just, again, want that sense of belonging. And in this world today where there's just so much disconnect and dissonance, when there's harmony, you stay. And so create that harmony that people have been looking for in your brand by all those mechanisms and the things I talk about in my book. And you're going to see some amazing stick rates, success, people who have, if you're into the numbers, your high-time LTV, your all-time LTV is going to be much higher when you focus on the people and how they can be connected with other people like them.
Such a great point. And, I see brands do this all over the place. You had like Lady Boss with Kalen Pullen. You had Funnel Hackers with ClickFunnels. I love your shirt too. We is greater than me. I mean, you're explaining this entire thing right there as I'm reading that. I'm like, you epitomize this. It's awesome. We could talk to you forever, Pat, but here's what I want to do before we go. Is there a place where people, if this is their first time being exposed to you, which is highly unlikely, but where would you like to have them go get more information? Where can they find you?
Oh, thank you guys. Chris and Benjamin, thank you so much for both having me on. This has been a pleasure, and it's been fun to tell these stories. Like I just have a blast every time, and I appreciate you for the platform. So two places. I write a weekly newsletter called Unstuck. So if you are just getting started and you're feeling stuck every once in a while, you want not just an inspirational story, but sometimes tactics and strategies on how to get to the next level in your business, head over to get the Unstuck newsletter. So Unstuck can be found at smartpassiveincome.com/unstuck. And just Smart Passive Income in general. I mean, maybe subscribe to the podcast because you're listening to a podcast already, and you can find me there. And we've got a lot of great things. You can join our community and just see what else we have to offer you there. And if anything, just say hi on social media at Pat Flynn, and I'd love to say hi back.
That's awesome. Go do it now. I just got some awesome stuff too, like in an email 5 minutes before we jumped on this webinar. I'm on Unstuck, so
nice.
Go check it out. This stuff is absolutely awesome. It's been our pleasure, Pat. So go check all that stuff out. Ben, any final words before we go?
No, I'm all set, Pat. I appreciate your time so much. That was a fantastic interview.
Thank you both.
Thanks, man.